right, so let's welcome back to the podcast, and it's definitely been a while, and that is with Dr. Cheri Souza. Dr. Souza was one of the first interviews I ever did for this podcast, and Cheri is the Post-Secondary Success Program Officer at the Stupski Foundation, where she leads the Hawaii Post-Secondary Success portfolio focused on holistic student support initiatives. Cheri is committed to fostering partnerships and collaborations across the Hawaiian Islands to provide students with the access and support they need to realize their educational and career goals. Cheri brings more than 15 years of experience working in higher education and has engaged with students at community college, baccalaureate, and graduate institutions. Cheri has led initiatives at the University of Hawaii Community Colleges to improve the college going rate of Hawaii high school students. Cheri earned her bachelor's degree in journalism and master's in business administration from Pacific Lutheran University before returning to Hawaii to earn her doctorate in education from University of Hawaii at Manoa. In her free time, Cheri enjoys running and spending time with family and friends, also enjoys hiking or being at the beach. Cheri, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm excited to talk with you again.
Yeah, and when we first did an interview, that was at the annual NACADA conference in Louisville in 2019, and that became one of the first interviews that was on the podcast when this started in 2020. And it was after the Region 9 networking meeting, and we had about 5 minutes or so to record an interview before the Region 9 dinner. And I didn't know what I was doing. And then, we had you on the podcast when many of us first went remote and the canceling of the region conferences in 2020. But that was more to talk about transitioning to online and what that meant. So to me, this is kind of like the actual first real interview I would say we're going to have with you. So how have things been?
Things have been good. I didn't realize how long ago that was, but you're right. How far we've come. So super excited to be here. Been a big follower of your podcast. Just thankful you're bringing me back for the third time. So maybe one of my answers were actually good. But since we last talked, I moved out of higher education. So I'm currently working at the Stupski Foundation, which you had shared, and that's definitely been interesting, as I thought I'd pretty much retire from higher ed. So that's new. Still on the NACADA steering committee, but as you know, I transitioned off as region chair, and there's someone much better and more exciting filling my shoes. I think his name might be Matt Markin.
No, I think he has large shoes to fill with you stepping off as cycling off as the region 9 chair. But I was thinking the other day, I was like, when was the last time we actually saw each other in person? Was it Louisville?
I think so, because I started with Stupski in September 2021. So I didn't make it to Ohio. And then the conferences prior were all virtual, I think. Is that?
Yeah. So
well, I'm looking forward to October 2022 because I will be in Portland and I will see you there.
Yes, Portland for the NACADA annual conference. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I think just time is just so weird where it's like you see someone in person, but then we see each other so many times on Zoom that it's like, well, is that real? Is it not? That this pandemic and hopefully.
Well, I don't think I saw the majority of our steering committee because I was 2019 through 2021.
Yeah.
So I'm very jealous you got to meet. I think you met more people on the steering committee.
Yeah, I got to meet like 4 of them in person at the Region 9 conference back in March. And it was like, you all are real. This is great. So yeah, you'll get to hopefully see some of them in Portland in October. So those that might not have caught your episodes that you were on, can you kind of tell us your path, your journey into higher education, into academic advising?
Sure. So I had a little bit of a different path. My undergraduate was in journalism, like you mentioned, and my goal was pretty much to be a news anchor. So after college, worked for a TV station, and then got laid off due to 9/11. And so at that point, just reevaluating, wasn't sure what I was going to do, and ended up going to work for the dean of the School of the Arts at Pacific Lutheran University. He gave me an opportunity to do academic advising, but also to kind of help him out. So I was his assistant. And it's funny because I told him, I was like, I don't want to work in education. My mom was a teacher. She told me never to work in education. I'm not interested. And he said, well, the way he sold it was you can go get your MBA degree because they had a tuition remission program. And so he said, just do this for 2 years, get your MBA degree, and then that way, you'll be more marketable. So I was like, oh, what else am I doing? So I did that. Actually loved working with students. That was probably the best part of the job. So I did that. And then it snowed. This was in Seattle. It snowed. I'm from Hawaii. Hawaii girls don't like snow. So I told my boss when the passes opened after I graduate, I'm going to drive to California. So I didn't have a plan other than driving to California because I just did not want to be in snow. So passes opened in March, drove to California and found a position managing endowment accounts at a private boarding school. And enjoyed it because it gave me the opportunity to still do advising. Although I was in the business office, because it was a boarding school, I had a group of high school students that I would advise and just loved that. But then quickly realized that while managing money was a lot of fun, I just missed the human element. So decided to look for another opportunity and ended up finding an opportunity at Cal State Fullerton as the director of graduate business programs there. And so that I loved it. And I knew that I was hooked and I thought I'd be in higher education forever. Worked there for a couple years, then ended up moving back home to work at the University of Hawaii at Manoa as the graduate business programs coordinator, doing pretty much the same thing with the graduate business programs. And then was there for about 6 years, transitioned to the community colleges, again, working with students who were then transferring to the 4 years. Did that, really loved it, and then ended up my last position within the University of Hawaii system was at the community college system office, just trying to figure out during the pandemic what can we do to better access for local students and how can we just help them get to college after graduation. 2020 was such a rough year for, we all know, for so many students. So just trying to figure out how to get them to college, how to keep them in college, and how to keep them engaged. And so that was my last position. And after that, I transitioned to the Stupski Foundation, where I'm a program officer for Hawaii Post-Secondary Success.
Yeah, so thinking back, it's like you didn't see yourself in higher ed, didn't want to be in higher ed, and then was in higher ed for many, many years and have excelled in it and helped so many students in it as well. Now, when you were in media, how was that? Was that, because I know that was something you wanted to do. How was that experience for you?
I loved it. I love talking to people, and I'm just nosy. And so you get to interview people and just learn things. I love just working under pressure, just having to write, stories. If I could go back, I would, but it doesn't, there's really high turnover in media. And so I was concerned about that. And when I got laid off, they laid off everybody on the top. So they laid off, the big anchors, and then they laid off the little people on the bottom, which was me. And I remember thinking at that time, I was like, oh, I don't want to be, old and not have something to fall back on, because I watched a lot of the top anchors just not be able to find something because all the media stations were laying off, whether it be radio, TV, and that was their life's work. So that was just very sobering, I think, for me. But I absolutely loved journalism. And it's very similar to what you're doing. You get to interview people, you get to talk to people. Just back when I did it, we had to actually have the beta tape and cut, and I loved all of that editing stuff. It was just so much fun.
Now, people listening to this podcast, how many of them know about the beta tape and doing all that? Well, it's even
so easy now.
Yeah. Yep. Some people might still complain about that. And I'm like, well, but you have it so much easier than it used to be. When I was a student, we used to have to go to the library, if you know what that is, and actually go and get the microfiche and, and look that up, and look old news articles and the newspapers. Yeah.
I just remember you had to wait for I think when we started to get digitized, you had to wait for it to render. And then sometimes the computer would freeze because it's rendering for like 6 hours. And
right.
Yeah, so very excited to see where technology has moved and see where it takes us.
Well, who knows? We might be going to Mars soon. I don't know. But kind of going back to, or now to, like your time in higher ed, and you were talking about how that was something that you didn't see yourself doing, but then ultimately you also were a recipient of the University of Hawaii Regents Medal for excellence in teaching. And this is like a tribute to faculty members who exhibit an extraordinary level of subject mastery, teaching effectiveness, even creativity, personal values, how it benefits students. Tell us about that award and receiving it.
That was a surprise. Traditionally, it is a faculty award. I was a faculty with University of Hawaii, but the way they classify it, I was a faculty counselor. So I think I was one of the first non-instructional faculty to be awarded that. So that was super just exciting for the counseling field in general. I think I've had a lot of great mentors, and I've had the best department chairs that I was working with at the time, and they really supported me. You need both peer nominations as well as student nominations for that. And so it was just such a surprise to be recognized, I think, by, the students that I just love. I mean, we all work with students. You never know who you're going to touch. And I think it was just such a special honor to be recognized by them. And then also my peers, the instructional faculty that I worked with, we had such a good relationship. And so that was just, nice to see them recognize the importance of academic advising and counseling, and how, if we're working together, we can really create more opportunities, more programming, and better student outcomes. And so, so that was pretty special. And I think when I had talked to one of the students who nominated me prior, after the event, I was thanking her. And I said, that was really unexpected. And she was just sharing a story how she never thought she'd get involved in anything on campus. She was like, yeah, I always delete the emails, but she's like, I actually read that one. I was like, no, thank you. And she goes, I've never submitted a survey, I've never done anything, but I read that one, and I felt, she was compelled to do it, so she did it. And we were kind of laughing, and I said, well, are you still opening emails? What's going on? Because I hadn't seen her in a while. And she goes, oh, you'd be so proud. She actually got into student government.
Oh,
and so she said, she goes, I realized I could make a change, or, something that I contributed actually,
right.
She could see the benefit and outcome. And I doubt it was not me, but she's like, yeah, after that, I started to, just get a little bit more involved. Because I would always talk to her also about getting involved in student government, and or just, I used to advise a student government club. So self-interest. But yeah, I would always talk to her about different opportunities and stuff. And it was just kind of cool to kind of see that, come full circle.
Nice. Yeah. And, like you're saying, you don't know who you're impacting, if anything, positively or negatively.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's always one for, I know we probably impact a lot more students, and, but for someone to be like, let me actually fill this out, go this extra step to submit this survey or this recommendation and nominate someone, I think that just shows how much of a positive impact that you had on this student and probably many other students. So it very well deserved for that. And prior to your new role at Stupski Foundation, you were leading the initiatives at the University of Hawaii community colleges. Can you talk about what was all involved in that role?
Sure. So this was in the very beginning of the pandemic. We were noticing a lot of Hawaii high school students were not completing FAFSA, just not engaged. So if you think back to 2020, yeah, it's hard to, like what year are we in right now? If you think back to 2020, the high school students, they had just transitioned online. A lot of the teachers didn't really understand teaching online, and especially at the high school level. So in our communications with community members, the Department of Education instructors, just college recruiters, we were just realizing that Hawaii students weren't going to college, and we weren't sure what their next steps were. Mm-hmm. And so my position was kind of created to figure out how do we create some type of programming to get them through the summer, or not, I guess, avoid that summer melt, get them through that summer, and then hopefully either give them opportunities at the community colleges, UH. We didn't, I don't want to say we didn't care, but we we just wanted to get them into higher education somewhere. I mean, they could have gone, to a program on the mainland. We just needed to get these Hawaii kids doing something. And so we created the Next Steps to Your Future program, which was a summer bridge program. And we, what did we do? We had free, I think it was, students could take up to 6 credits over the summer. And then we had like a easier application process for the fall semester. So there was also onboarding, and different things. So we worked really closely with the high schools, the college counselors, the community, to figure out, what what these students needed, what they wanted. And then we also, my director did a lot of fundraising also so that we could give students scholarships for the fall semester. So it was helpful, looking back when we look at the numbers of students that came. But it was just a time when we were just really concerned about the future of these young people. Um, I know they're just getting rid of mask mandates in Hawaii, and they're kind of lessening the restrictions, and just looking at the students who are graduating this coming May in a couple of weeks compared to the students that we worked with. And they've come such a such a long way, but there's still so many things that I wonder about, just, social, emotionally, because it's just a different time that they were in during the pandemic.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, yeah, they're completing it, which is great. They're graduating, but yeah, how are they? It's these last few years, even like for staff, and it's just all across the board, staff, faculty, and then especially the students. How are they going to be dealing with kind of like this where we're at now, where you have a lot of restrictions that are lifted. We're kind of going back to some type of normalcy, but the time that they were in school, it was just so much different. But if anything, like, students are resilient and they've adapted as best they can. So, wish them the best on everything that happens after this. But hopefully there is the additional help for them as well that we might be able to provide them. And now you work at the Stupski Foundation. And for those who don't know, like, what is this foundation? What's the mission?
So the Stupski Foundation is a private spend-down foundation focused in the geographies of Bay Area, California, so the San Francisco area, as well as Hawaii. And so our founders were Joyce and Larry Stupski, and those were their beloved communities. They had homes in the Bay Area, and they spent a lot of time at their homes in Hawaii as well. And so being immersed in the community really showed them there were some definite needs that they saw. And so they really wanted to contribute back to those communities that they lived in. So the foundation focuses on 4 areas. The first one is food security. The second one is early brain development. Third one is serious illness care. And then the fourth one is post-secondary success. And so as a spend down foundation, that means we're pretty much spending all of our assets by 2029. And the rationale behind that is our founder really wanted to see the greatest amount of change in her lifetime. Unfortunately, she passed this past June. However, her legacy, is really to create that really big systems change. We're kind of a different funder in that we do things a little bit differently. We're really community-based, really working with different organizations and institutions to see how we can best increase student outcomes in the post-secondary success area. And so it's been really interesting and just such a great experience being now on the other side of higher education and really looking into the communities that I live in and I'm part of, and seeing, what can we do to better improve the outcomes for these young people in Hawaii.
It sounds very much like a really great organization, this foundation, and kind of the model that you all are implementing, and kind of the values and beliefs from the founders. And yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what happens over these next few years through 2029. And now your specific role, you're the Hawaii Post-Secondary Success Program Officer. So what does that role mean? What does that role entail?
It's a mouthful. It took me a while
Yeah.
to get it all out.
Right. Does it all fit on the business card on one line?
It's 2 lines. So I'm driving the initiatives in Hawaii. And so I have a colleague who's the program officer in the Bay Area, and then we have a director who oversees the 2 of us. But as far as all of the strategies in Hawaii, I'm responsible for creating them and then going out and working with community organizations and institutions to really implement them. So in the area of post-secondary success in Hawaii, there's 4 strategies excuse me, that I'm looking at. So the first one is general advising. So how do we get young people to college? How do we keep them in college? And then how do we help them graduate? Working in higher ed, you all know why that's so important. The second one is looking at workplace learning opportunities. So how can we better prepare our young people for the next chapter? And so whether that be going to college, so working with colleges, working with high schools to create more apprenticeship models or other type of opportunities, that's one route. And then the other route is really realizing that college isn't for every student. And if it's not, that's fine. But, what can we do to better prepare those young people who decide not to go to college? Are there other um, work-based learning type of opportunities, certifications, things that we can offer to them so that when they do graduate high school, they're able to earn a livable wage? That's the second area. The third area is holistic student support systems. And so everything outside of the classroom. We both know how important mental health is right now. But if you can't take care of your basic needs, it's really hard to be a student in the classroom, right? You can have 9 out of 10 needs met, but if it's that 10th need, that's going to unfortunately have really negative effects on students. So looking at holistic student support systems. And the fourth area is unique to Hawaii. It's community building, so to speak. So in Hawaii, it's such a collective nature, and it's not just the nuclear family that's raising a child. It's really the whole community. So what can we do to create more discussion and more conversations about post-secondary options? And so again, college, yes, obviously, definitely want to push college, but realizing that college may not be for everyone, and what kind of conversations can we start having at a community level to encourage students to think about post-secondary opportunities and options. And so those are the strategy areas I'm focusing on. I have a emphasis into the rural communities and neighboring islands. Although I grew up on Oahu, Oahu is very well resourced. One of the challenges I think living in an island state is that each island has its own challenges, and downtown is located on Oahu. And so if you live, say, on Kauai, you don't have access to as many of the opportunities that living on Oahu would be. So I am looking for more opportunities on the neighbor islands.
Yeah, and it seems very, very holistic with it. And yeah, it's nice that it's, college is a push, higher ed's a push, but you're looking at all kind of alternatives or different pathways for individuals, whether it is college bound or not. And then when you keep, when you're talking about community, and then I'm thinking like it takes a village, for a lot of this. So very much has like kind of this grassroots effort in a way. And with that in mind, like you were in higher ed for many years, still kind of tied to higher ed in a way with this position, but also in a way you're the outside person looking in on higher ed. How is it kind of going from being kind of in it to now being the outside person watching it and maybe having some type of impact on it?
It's kind of weird. I never thought I'd leave higher education, but now looking from the outside, I feel really blessed in that I do grant making, so I have resources that I can actually contribute to these communities that I was a part of. Working in higher ed, I remember there was times where like begging for $100 to do a pizza party or something small. But now I'm on the other side of that, and that I'm trying to encourage groups to think a little bit bigger and think wider to see what kind of impact or what kind of programming, what kind of systems can we change to make better outcomes for students, and just feeling really blessed that I'm able to funnel resources to kind of help those things occur. I think working in higher ed gives me also a unique perspective, because I think and my experience was always when the college would apply for grants as an academic advisor or counselor, I wasn't too involved. Typically, it was more at the dean level. And then things would kind of come down and we had to implement it, which is good. But it would have been nice to have a little more of a voice. And so now as I'm doing grant making, I'm always trying to pull in student voice. I'm trying to pull in the voice of the people who will actually be implementing it. Because I think a lot of times, while the people who are in administration may be applying for the grants, they don't see the day in and day out. They understand it very well, but they don't see what's on the ground. So I think that's one unique perspective that I've kind of brought to this grant making, is really trying to almost crowdsource, information, just with the understanding that in student success, there's so many components and so much, I think, that advisors know that admin may not be privy to, just because they have so much going on. So really trying to change the way that we do our request for proposals process, and really trying to just bring those voices into the conversation.
Yeah, I bet there's people listening going, wow, I wish that I had something like that at my institution. I mean, but I think a lot will probably agree that a lot of it is at the dean at higher admin level, then it kind of just like trickles down. But it is great to where it's like you have like a lot of the voices, especially those that are on the ground at the front lines that really know that day to day and have that experience and can really help give some of that knowledge, maybe put that into the grant and make it worth its while. I know for me, like we have at our institution, we have a technology grant where they kind of use some of the student fees that goes to this grant. So there is like a lot of assessment that goes with it if you do get the grant. So you got to prove it that you utilized everything. But kind of just going through that whole process, I was so glad to be able to do it from start to finish. Like, oh, this is how this goes, for grant writing. But to get the grant, and then it's like, okay, now I have this money, I got to figure out how we're going to actually use it. It's a great experience. I encourage anyone, if you have the opportunity to help with a grant, write a grant, definitely do it. And here's more of a personal question. Again, going from higher ed to this foundation, what were kind of some of the reasons that was like, what, let me make this decision to in a sense leave higher ed for the Stupski Foundation? Was it something about the foundation that connected with you? What was the factors that made you kind of take that leap?
It was a hard decision because I had been with the universe. I just feel so old. I'm thinking about retirement, but I can't retire yet. But I was vested. I had my retirement set. I was ready to apply, for that last promotion in the faculty ranks. And so I had to weigh all of that when this opportunity came up. And like I said, I had no intention of leaving. I think I applied maybe on the last or second to the last day because I really just kind of thought, oh, I'm happy where I am. But when I was thinking about it, I just kind of thought, how blessed would I be if I was in that role in which I could direct the post-secondary strategy in Hawaii. And, I'm from Hawaii. I moved away, came back, have no intention of leaving ever again. And this is really the community that my kids are going to grow up in. And I just thought, how awesome would it be to be a part of that conversation? And having worked at the university level and understanding some of the constraints when it came to budgetary issues, and thinking, well, if I worked for the foundation, if I had this opportunity, I could really direct funding to certain areas. So that was one thing that kind of encouraged me to go after this and learn a little bit more and actually turn the application in. And then I was talking to my director at the time. She's actually the one who encouraged me to apply. And so just was really grateful that even though me applying and eventually leaving did kind of put her at a disadvantage because she was down, people, she really did encourage me to take that risk. And something she had told me was, I forget how she phrased it, but she said, you can always come back to higher ed. This isn't the rest of your life. It's a spend down foundation. They're only around for 9 years, but imagine the change you can make, especially, to your community. And just being a local girl and just having that opportunity, I think was really attractive. Just because, being an island state, there's just access issues. There's funding issues. We're not connected to the rest of the United States. So even just traveling has always been a burden for our young people because we can't just get in the car and drive, X amount of miles to do college trips. A lot of the students go to college blind. They just wherever they're accepted. So being able to just really impact areas such as like even college affordability. So many students pick the college based on where they get the greatest scholarships, but they don't often think about college fit. And that's just, it breaks my heart because I see all these students then coming back, and they're like, that just didn't work out. It wasn't the right fit. And so I think just being, so when she put it in that perspective, I thought, that's something that I'm just going to try for. And if it happens, it happens. But if not, I'm not going to be upset. I'm still with University of Hawaii, which is great. And I made it through the interview process. And as I talked with the team at Stupski, really realized that my values are really aligned with them. And just the more that I talked, the more I researched and saw what the opportunity could provide, just really got me excited. And so here I am. I'm actually in San Francisco today. I work remotely from home in Hawaii, but every now and then up here. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
And then if anyone's watching the YouTube version of this, in the background, there's buildings outside of Sherry's office. What floor are you on?
I'm on the 11th floor. And so, yeah, in downtown, in the financial district in San Francisco, which is, I never imagined myself working in a high rise. And so, beautiful building here. And I have an office for when I come up.
Yeah, that's great. Like you know, you're in Hawaii, but then travel to San Francisco. You already have an office there. Hey, you can't beat that. That's awesome. And I think kind of tied to what you were saying about like your values and everything, like there's a quote, and I think it was on the website, and it said, "Now is the time to strengthen Hawaii's diverse communities by investing in our young people." And I am honored to be working in the community I grew up in, and I'm inspired by the foundation's commitment to supporting positive changes that will last long into Hawaii's future. So that was a perfect quote that you had there.
Thank
And
you.
what do you think about the, this great resignation that a lot of people keep talking about and many of us are actually kind of witnessing happen? Not, it's happening all over, but a lot of us are seeing it within like higher ed.
Yeah. And to be honest, when I was there, just and that was in 2020, just looking at how burnt out people were in the beginning, and hearing conversations, that burnout has continued. And as we're kind of again reopening, just really being concerned because there's often a lot of support for faculty, but when it comes to the academic advisor, sometimes I feel that just the support isn't there because admin may not truly understand everything that being an academic advisor entails. I know there's days that you go from like really just doing, grad checks, but then there's all this other stuff that comes out is when you're looking into, why did you get a D in this class and you're not graduating, but so much more comes out. And then you end up spending, hours with a student, and doing referrals and whatnot. And it's those types of things I think that admin don't realize. And so when they look at these, sometimes, return to work policies or whatnot, it can create an unintended divide, I think, between instructional and non-instructional people. But the great resignation, I'm just so worried about it because, you can't have all these student success initiatives at the statewide or at the institutional level without academic advisors. Yes, faculty are very important because they're teaching the content, but it's that support, it's academic advisors that are keeping young people at college and in the classrooms. So I worry that if people are leaving the field, what that'll look like for students in our future. Um, can I share something that the foundation is doing?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to one of your previous questions about what it's like now being on the outside looking into higher ed. One of the things that we've been talking about is we have been supporting a lot of academic advising initiatives. And my director said, do you think I'm doing good? Like, do you think I'm doing good, or am I making the lives of academic advisors more challenging? And so it's like, well, to be honest, I think you're making it a little bit more challenging, because again, these are one of these, bigger grants. And there weren't a lot of academic advisors involved in the creation of it. But then I said, what if we look into a way that we can support academic advisors a little bit more? And so she and I started talking, and she came up with this great idea to see if we can pretty much do an open request for proposals for a select group of advisors and see if they can come up with advisor wellness initiatives, realizing that a lot of times wellness is not, while it's important and while it may be prioritized, funding sometimes can't just flow freely there just due to the funding sources. A lot of times for state institutions, you can't buy food with, tuition revenue money or things like that. So she and I were brainstorming and came up with an idea to kind of pilot it in Region 9, to see if academic advisors can come up with basically advising wellness initiatives to help advisors just have better mental health and wellness, now. And then also to bring more attention to the advising profession. So we're hoping to launch that in the next couple of weeks and then have kind of a pilot at the 2022 annual conference. But excited to see the type of initiatives that come out through there. We're kind of saying, we don't want to sponsor pizza party, but really encouraging and challenging people to think deeper. What type of systems changes can we create, at the college or at the institution level to ensure that advisors are being taken seriously, and are also not overworked and are in an environment in which they feel valued. Because I think that all contributes, right, to that great resignation. It's feelings of just not being valued, burnout, the long hours, not being recognized. And so, what can we do to kind of shift that perspective and just focus really on advisor wellness?
Yeah, it's what are the answers, if there are answers and solutions to this? But if anything, I think this is a great step in that direction. And then you're bringing in, having again people from the the front lines, the ones that are on the ground making these initiatives happen that trickle down to them, and now with less people. So hopefully they'll have some creative ideas of what can be done to at least, whether it solves it or helps with, not making it as bad as things currently are for a lot of folks. And one of the things too is, like, now that we kind of are getting towards the end of this interview, you like to hike and go to the beach. A lot of people are probably jealous of that, that you live in Hawaii. Do you have a favorite hiking spot or a favorite beach you like to go to?
Um, Favorite hiking. We like to do the Kana Point Trail. It's probably a good 4 or 5 miles, but there's beach along the way. So we go look for shells, go play in the water when we get hot. And then I usually feed the kids lunch at the end of the hike, and it's like a direct shot back. But yeah, I think that's probably our favorite hike. It gets hot. There's no shade, but it's just beautiful. And then you're at the tip of the island. And then pretty much any beach on the North Shore without a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone, they're going to Oahu, and they're like, where should we go to the beach? And I was like, stay out of Waikiki. um, but yeah, any beach with not a lot of people. We used to go to the more hidden ones through like access paths and stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, go to Waikiki if you just want to see where a lot of shows are
Yes.
filmed, or you just want to be surrounded by a whole bunch of people.
That too, yeah. Yeah, definitely travel's opened up. My flight up here was packed, and I actually had to wait at TSA to get through the pre-check line. That hasn't happened the previous 2 times I was up, but travel's back.
Travel
for better,
is
for
back.
worse.
Yeah, and then Southwest, now goes to Hawaii, so maybe people get some good discounts on some tickets to go hopefully take a vacation or something. And then if anyone has any questions or, based off something you've said, or want to follow up with you, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out on LinkedIn, or they can email me. My email is Cheri, Cheri @stupski.org.
Awesome.
Wait, hold on.
Oh.
Wait, is it org or is it, what is my email? Why am I having a moment? Hold on, Matt.
Cheri @stupski.org.
It is org, right?
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I was like, is that right? Jeez, sorry.
I might just leave this part in.
Give them my fake email.
They're like, it bounced back. What's going on? Well, Sherry, I appreciate you taking the time to be on this podcast. And again, I feel like this is the first official one, I feel, because again, when we did it in 2019, I didn't know what I was doing. I just had a camera and a microphone. Still didn't know what I was doing when you were on the podcast early on. We were talking about the pandemic. So I feel like I know what I'm doing now, at least for the most part.
You could have fooled me each time. You were always a professional and so good and ready to go. But thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate this chance to just talk to you. And yeah, I love what you're doing. So keep it up.
Yeah, maybe we'll follow up end of the year or early next year and see how things have gone with the grants.
Yeah, I would love to do that.